you first started with Oliver Stone, you're on Wall Street, right?
That's true. Yes, that's correct. But I had been editing on my own for years. It's just I hadn't had a break. I'd been editing student films and anything I could get my hands on, and also assisting. But I never wanted to assist, so I always edited, even without pay.
When you started working under Mr. Stone, what distinguished him in your eyes?
That he would listen to anyone. That you didn't have to go up to the traditional. He was very untraditional in how he hired editors, and so the fact that by the next picture I had a front credit was kind of astonishing. But I didn't know that at the time. But he ran a very non-traditional cutting room, and that he did not want to hear from. It was a very guarded place where we could share ideas.
But it seems to me that Mr. Stone was kind of redefining his style of shooting from film to film, and by the time we get to JFK, it was very kind of aggressively experimental. So I'm curious to know, before you started cutting, were you in on how much you were in on the conversation of the direction he was taking this?
No, I was not. I was unaware of it. I knew that they were going to, as soon as we started shooting, they had multiple formats. And so we started shooting in Dallas on April 15th. And at that time, we had just finished The Doors. And The Doors was a nonlinear film, in that we cut it it was the first digital nonlinear film for editing, because we used the Edit Droid on that, which was partially financed by George Lucas. And so he gave us free laser discs, or he paid for the transfer of the laser discs on The Doors so that we could use it in return for Oliver giving it a plug, giving it a good word. So it turned out it was a buggy system. It was we were beta testing it, but I still loved it immediately, because it was I thought that would be the future, some kind of electronic editing. And then when we got to JFK, which was the next year, we did not have the budget to transfer everything to Laserdisc, and George Lucas wasn't going to pay for another film to do that. And the transfer process from film to Laserdisc was very expensive, so we couldn't afford that. So we are in Dallas. I have my 35 millimeter flatbed film editing equipment, which were called chems, from Germany, and then we started getting in Super 8, Straight 8, 16 millimeter, and then of course all the stock footage. And I couldn't edit those on a chem, because it's just 35 millimeters. And so one option was to transfer everything to have it telecine. They would turn it in. They would transfer it from whatever format it was on to 35 millimeter. Again, incredibly expensive. So as the footage is starting to pile up, the three editors, myself, Pietro Scalia, and Hank Corwin, were scratching our heads going, what are we going to do? How can we edit this when we don't have anything to edit on? And I had done a lot, because I had done student films for years at AFI. I said, let's try 3/4 inch linear videotape, because time was running out. And there really wasn't anything else. Avid didn't exist, Lightworks didn't exist, and Edit-Droid was an impossibility. So we transferred everything to 3/4 inch videotape and began editing on that, which is a very brutal way to edit, I must say, because it is linear, and it's ugly, and it's slow. And so, in other words, if you have linear, meaning if you have two shots in a row and you want to add a shot in the middle very easy to do that with film because you just put it in. And it's very easy on an Avid because you insert it, and it's nothing. It's nonlinear. It'll just go right in. But with the 3/4-inch linear, you would have to bump down a generation in order to add a shot. It was a very bad way to do it, but it was really the only logical choice we had. In a way, it was also a great way to do it because the machine made mistakes all the time. It was very imperfect, and sometimes those mistakes turned into happy accidents, and we could claim authorship of some weird transition that we'd never thought of. It just happened by some electronic ghost. But, of course, that didn't happen very often. I wish it had happened a lot more. Most of it, 99.9% of it was just very, very hard work.
Even so, if I'm correct in the timing of this, the timing between shooting the film and delivering the final print was very short, wasn't it?
Oh yes, we started shooting April 15th, 1991, and we were in the theaters on December 20th.
Oh,
that's 8 months, and so the schedule was brutal. We basically had almost no days off, and that's tough, especially the last few months when you're so tired. And we were working 16-hour days easily, sometimes more, 7 days a week. And we moved one of our assistants up to an editor position. So there were a lot of people working on it. The process of later going from this weird 3/4-inch tape that had time codes all over it, so you would know where it originated from, filmically. We had to bring in a crew of people to actually decipher what the codes meant, and then build the actual film that they shot to match it. And at one point, I had 25 people working under me in an editing room. That included all the editors and the assistants and apprentices. But I think the most I've had in the past is like 6 or 7. So having 25 people under me was pretty amazing. And I didn't even, some of the people I never even met because they were in distant rooms just building stuff. And we were so busy. It was a huge task.
But one of the things that impresses me most about it is in JFK you have these hundreds of moving parts, but you never lose sight of the central journey, the journey of the central character of Jim Garrison. Was it a challenge to maintain that in the midst of all of this chaos going around his personal journey?
Yes. The script was, I can't remember how many pages it was, but it was very long. Look, it's a 3-hour and 8-minute movie, and that's a long script. The script was very dense, and it was hard for me to read because it was very technical. It was very detailed, and I found at times it was just boring. And the challenge with the movie was to keep it moving and to never be confused, because it would be, if you get confused, you zone out. And that was one thing that we never wanted the audience to feel the least bit of confusion. There are some repetitious moments in JFK, but they're only to remind you of where you are in the story and who is who. They were done for that reason. All other bits of repetition were eliminated so that the story would move forward. But I think with the way it was shot and the way we edited it to keep it fresh and to keep it lively instead of static, that helped you through this 3-hour and 8-minute journey of an exploration into an assassination.
Yeah, because there's so much information being delivered and thrown at you in these scenes. I'm thinking of the dinner table scene at the restaurant where they're deconstructing Oswald's history. And, you know, if you just read it from the script, you might as well be a lecturer with a PowerPoint presentation. It could be very dry. That is what most amazes me about it, is that it fires your visual imagination so much as an audience.
We had a great asset on that movie, and that was Hank Corwin, who had come out of commercials, and it was the first thing he'd worked on. And Hank is a very prolific and incredibly well-respected commercial editor. And so he had a lot of very unusual ideas that we were completely open to. And so his idea of cutting using that X-Acto knife, cutting around and cutting the picture of Oswald for the cover of Life magazine was done by Hank. And I thought that was just brilliant. He was a great part of that crew. And so I think we all inspired each other. Hank certainly inspired me, as did Pietro, who was just learning basically at that point. It was his first job as a picture editor. And we all worked together, although we certainly had clashing moments. But I think because the movie itself is so much about conflict, I think that if there was any conflict in the editing, it worked in terms of just being a part of that motif of conflict that ran throughout the film. Conflict of stories. It's a Rashomon story, and so everyone had a different take on it, and then we put those together. Amazingly, scenes cut very, very easily. I think Oliver was at the height of his game during that, and all the footage just was not. I mean, it was difficult because we were working so long and we had such a brutal deadline, but the actual footage itself was very well done and just seemed to go together effortlessly. Although we did work hard, and some scenes were harder than others, and we did a little bit of restructuring. But all in all, it was very fun to cut.
And there's something that fascinates me about a technique that Mr. Stone uses in his movies, and I think it pops up most prominently and earliest in JFK, which is the kind of subliminal cuts. I'm not sure how else to express it, but where you'll cut to an actor or an event that very subliminally expresses what's going on in the main scene.
We tried to use that throughout the movie, and honestly, when we were working out, I'd never seen a movie like that. When I would watch it, I'd go, you know what, this is original, and I just thought, I wonder if people will like it or so connect with it. I connected with it, but I was so close to it. But those moments were peppered throughout the film and done intentionally, and really just done for an atmospheric or reflective quality to bring you closer to that feeling that you would get, that you wouldn't just get from straight dialogue. It becomes poetry in a sense, I guess, instead of just talk.
I can recall archival footage very prominently in the opening of the film. Obviously, when you're setting up the event, but it becomes harder and harder to distinguish in the course of the film what is a recreation and what is perhaps archival footage outside of the Donald Sutherland scene, I suppose. Tell me the challenges of knowing when and how much archival footage to use.
It's really a gut thing, but for instance, when they shot Ruby, when Ruby shot Oswald, that was, of course, we had the film from the real shooting, which is very famous, and they also recreated it with the characters, with Gary Oldman and with Brian Doyle Murray played Jack Ruby. And so when I cut that together, I did it in a way to use both. And obviously because you don't want to cut from, you know, you've already established this character, which is Brian Doyle Murray and Gary Oldman as Lee Harvey Oswald. So you can't just cut to the fake one. So in some of those cases, I did use quite a bit of the actual assassination, but I intercut it. You can't use very much, but it's great, and it was so fun to blur the lines between the actual assassination, you know, the killing and the fake one. And I really those were some of the things I enjoyed the most. Intercutting, you know, Zapruder with film that we recreated in Dealey Plaza and throughout the film. It was very fun to use it, and your taste dictates how much to use. You want it to look real. You want it to have maximum impact. So if something looks at all fake, you don't use it. Or if you just go, oh, that doesn't quite work, you just take it out. You try something else. But in all cases, if we had something where there was real footage and they recreated it, we absolutely wanted to use that in every case, just to because part of you has seen that film and you know it's real, and then when you see it cut in, it just adds a dynamism to the film, which it wouldn't have if it was just one or the other. Bob handed out cameras to so many people, so there was a lot of people had Super 8 cameras that day, the recreation day. And so, you know, that was just a mind-boggling amount of footage just to go through, because a lot of some of the people were amateurs, but it didn't matter. I just looked at all the footage as, is this good? Is this good? And then, of course, Bob was there too with 16, 35, all different, just, black and white color. It was wild. And, if you look at the movie too, you can see that the aspect ratio is changing constantly, meaning that the sides that, sometimes there's black bars on the sides and sometimes there aren't. And we thought about that when we were doing that. Is that going to bother anyone? And I just felt strongly that no one was going to care and no one would see that. Like if you just did it, just go with it. And if you follow the dialogue, the thread of the story, you're not really going to notice that the sides move, that there's black bars, and I don't think anyone notices that. And I didn't even notice it. I didn't think about it.
I've watched it countless times, and it's never been something that has affected my enjoyment of the movie in the least. But we're talking about the archival, and for a lot of us, I mean, me included, this was the first time we saw the Zapruder film in full, mainly the kill shot, which is so exceptionally shocking, and it's repeated time and time again back and to the left, and that had to have been intentional from the get-go, because this was the kind of the crux of the case for conspiracy in a way.
There again, a little bit of repetition, but done in a great way. Looking at the film, the Zapruder film, and I think we finally got it. We got everything. I can't remember, but I think we were the first people to have the whole thing and had it steadied and have every frame, because I think the FBI had cut it up, or the police department had cut it up to analyze it. Anyway, they restored it, so we had the entire thing. And even though I saw it countless times, over and over, backwards and forwards, every time that came on, it just devastating to see for me. And I remember that day because I was 9. I was in 4th grade when it happened. And the teacher came, we were in class, and the principal came in and whispered something to our teacher. And she sat down and put her head down and started crying. And then the principal said there'll be an announcement in a half an hour in the lunch court. So I think everyone who is, of the age where you can remember anything remembers that day. And so the movie was especially powerful for me because it was a part of my life.
Yeah. Did you get a sense from a lot of the people that you were working with that this did feel like sacred ground that you guys were covering?
Yes, I felt that myself. I don't know how much other people felt about it, but I definitely felt that and was excited to work on it. I think, like a lot of people, of course, I remember the event, and my grandparents saw Oswald being assassinated by Ruby live on television. And then when the Warren report came out, they said, lone killer, you know, a guy who was a nut. And I think we all pretty much, I was like everybody else, I pretty much accepted, well, you know, they've done it. There was no reason to distrust the government at that moment. And I think I accepted along with everyone else and hadn't really thought about it until Oliver sent me the script, and I started thinking about it. I thought, wow, I didn't know any of this stuff. And then, I read a few books and became very interested in it, and was very happy that I could work on something like that made a difference. It was hugely controversial.
Yeah, and I think about the controversy surrounding the film even before it started shooting. I mean, it was unparalleled, the media scrutiny against the film. But then when it finally opened and it was successful, I mean, audiences eventually flocked to it. I think it kind of spoke to the assassination was still and is still kind of an open wound, and I think people were anxious
Absolutely.
to engage with it. So, but this was something that you nurtured and you cared deeply about, as we just said. So when it finally was released, and amidst all the criticism, it found success with audiences. That must have felt incredibly gratifying for you.
Incredibly gratifying. Well, first of all, I had no idea that people were going to talk about the editing so much. When we're working on it, we're not thinking about. You're just thinking about getting the job done, and hopefully people will understand it and just going, oh, my God, it's 3 hours. Is anyone really going to watch this? And it was amazing how people loved it and just said, wow, I can't believe I watched a 3-hour movie and was riveted the whole time. And that, to me, was that was part of the success of the editing, was that we were able to make that an involving film that is, it's not sexy. It's horror show stuff, and then to make that a 3-hour movie of that was a challenge, and to make it compelling for the entire time. So, yeah. and then when it came out, it was just gratifying. The fact that it did so well in terms of awards and stuff was really fun. But when we were working on it, we never were thinking about that. It was just, let's just make this as good as we can and get the job done. But it was really, I was stunned by the reception of it. And I was also stunned by some of the, I remember I talked to this one guy. It was when I was working on the movie, and I called I can't remember, he's a famous filmmaker, and he'd done, geez, I wish I could remember what this is, Jamie, but he was a guy who made a fortune in Hollywood and television, and he did like a movie called, it was a short documentary about how Oswald acted alone or something, and I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, I called this guy, I got him on the phone, I said, hey, my name is Joe Hutshing, I'm editing this movie called JFK, and I wanted to know if you had any access to footage or something. And he said, you're working on that Oliver Stone film? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, you can tell him to go fuck himself, and fuck you too. And he hung up on me. And I went, wow, that was when I first got, wow, I guess not everyone believed that there might have been other shooters. And it was almost like then I started to, I talked to people that were like my doctor at the time, my general practitioner. I went in to see him, and he had seen JFK, and he wanted to lecture me about it, about how that was bullshit. That, it's Oliver Stone was a conspiracy theorist, and it was just like, wow, I didn't know. It really touched a nerve in some people, and I was surprised at that.
Yeah, but I would imagine that's better than the alternative, which is indifference.
No one saw your movie?
Yeah.
No one cared. They're like, what did you work on? I never heard of it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the opposite.
Let me tell you what always struck me about the movie and why I continue to find it so incredibly inspiring. I mean, not only is it the great murder mystery of our time, the JFK assassination, and not only is the technical wizardry of the film so precise and beautiful, but I think what the movie is ultimately about is a deep sense of this is your country, hold your leaders accountable. You can determine the future of the world in which you live. And I think that that's missed a lot about JFK, and that's what touched me so deeply as an 18-year-old watching it, and that's why I appreciate your work on it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's just, you know, if it makes you think and strikes a deep emotional chord and makes you question the status quo, I think that then it's achieved its goal. And the music too. I mean, that was another thing that was just amazing about that film was working with John Williams, and he gave us a score early on. He came in to see a cut that we'd done while we were still shooting, and then he gave us, I think, 6 or 7 themes that we could mix and match and move around, and we did. And that was an incredible luxury to get score that early in a movie, because usually it's at the end. And so he gave us these little things that they'd done either on a synthesizer or with a small orchestra, but they were all the same themes that were in the final movie. And he just said, put them wherever you want. This one I think would be, obviously this one's the Cuban theme, and but and there were other ones that were for suspense, and there were pads. But that was incredible, and I thought John Williams' score on that was just stupendous.
It's beautiful. Yeah,
part of and a major factor in why the movie worked so well.
Well, it was suspenseful and haunted and idealistic. I mean, it captured all of it. I mean, so many flavors in that movie, and it absolutely captured it.
I wanted to. One of your things was to share any personal experiences in the film, and I have a couple of good ones.
Sure.
So one day, while we were still in Dallas, so it's the first month of shooting, and they were shooting they were going to shoot Jack Ruby's club. Jack Ruby owned a strip club where Oswald used to go and hang out. I mean, that's just weird in itself, right? It's just, there's so many weird things about that movie. Anyway, so Oliver came into my editing room and said, hey, Joe, this woman, Beverly Oliver, was a stripper at Jack Ruby's club. And she was also she was the babushka lady. She was on the middle lawn, kind of near Jean Hill, facing the grassy knoll. They were sort of like as Kennedy's car came down the street where he got shot, they were right there. They were like some of the closest people to Kennedy. So anyway, he said, so Beverly Oliver used to be a stripper. She was a dancer at Jack Ruby's club, and she wants to come in and play you some music. She's going to play you some music for the so we know what they played on that day, at that time in Jack Ruby's club. So I said, oh, okay. So in my office in Dallas, and I was actually working on that scene where the part of the assassination scene in the plaza, in Dealey Plaza, and there's a knock at my door, and in comes this woman who was attractive and voluptuous, but quite a bit older than me. I was a fairly young man at the time, and she said, and she had a little boombox, a little cassette player with it, and she said, "Oh, I hear. Can I play this music for you?" And I said, "Oh, sure." So, oddly enough, she was on the real Beverly Oliver was on my screen, on my editing machine. And so she turned on the cassette, and it was a song called Apple Blossom Pink, Cherry Blossom White. I can't remember the name of it. It's a standard. Anyway, she turned it on, and then she was wearing a very tight-fitting outfit. I knew she'd been very hot at one point in her life. Although she seemed ancient to me, although I think she was 50, but I don't know, at the time that seemed really old. And she started dancing in my editing room. And you know that thing when dancers, they twirl, their head like stays in the same spot in their body, and they're looking at you, and then their body whips around, and then their head follows. It was one of those things. She started dancing. She started doing this erotic dance in my editing room in Dallas. That was weird. That was a moment I thought, I'll never forget this. And then she was very nice, and then she packed up her thing, and I said, so, Miss Oliver, when you were there, what did you see? She said, and she told me that she had seen a flash from above the picket fence and smoke. And when I talked to Jean Hill later, who I also met, who was next to her on the lawn, she said the same thing. Flashes above the picket fence and smoke. I mean, these are people that told me to my face that were there and had no reason to lie. That was interesting. Another story was kind of I was in my editing room at Lantana in Los Angeles, and Ann Richards, the governor of Texas, came to visit us, and Oliver Stone said, I want to show Ann some of the footage. Why don't you pick out like half an hour or something and just show it to her. So a couple of weeks before then, just by coincidence, one of my assistants and I we had decided to make a T-shirt of a JFK T-shirt, kind of a crew T-shirt, and we used Gary Oldman's picture from the movie, a still where he had been hit and his eye was bloody, and the caption said, "I'm just a patsy, JFK," and Oliver Stone film or something like that. Anyway, so I had those made up. So when Ann came in to see the movie, after she saw it, I gave her and it was just me and Ann watching the movie, and she was then the governor of Texas. It was pretty wild. And when she was done, she really liked the section I sent her, that I showed her, and I gave her a JFK T-shirt that I designed, and in front of me, she didn't get a dress. She just put it on over her clothes, and she wore it out, and she walked out. She walked out to her car with the JFK T-shirt on, which I thought was amazing. During the shooting of the film, I thought that because so many people had died during the investigation of the assassination, and so many shenanigans had happened to people that were on trial or being investigated for various reasons surrounding the assassination. I kept thinking, because we were in New Orleans, which is kind of an intelligence seat of power, I kept thinking I'd come into my editing room and everything would be gone, or somehow there'd be, what happened to all the negative burned down? The negative burned in a fire or something. I kept thinking something horrible would happen, but nothing ever did.
It also brings to mind, it's such a unique project for anyone to be involved in, because when you're visited by those people, it reminds you that, these are actual real people that are still living, and I have a responsibility to do justice to their story.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And it's funny. So now, just in terms of my own beliefs, as far as the assassination, because I get asked about it a lot by people. Well, what do you know? Not that I'm an assassination buff or an expert by any means, but from everything that I've read and from working on the movie and doing my own research, I feel that Lee Harvey Oswald was set up, but I believe he was one of the shooters. Mm-hmm. I think he was a shooter, but I don't think he was the only one. Which is basically when the Warren Commission reconvened, what they came up with. They said, I'm paraphrasing, but they said most likely, now that we have more information, it is in all likelihood there were multiple shooters, and so
right.
That's how I feel. Now, who they were, God, will we ever know? I don't know. That would be one question I would love to know.
If we do ever know, will we accept it?
I'm one of those guys that I guess it's rare, but I always wanted to be an editor, and that's what I set up to be, and that's what I did. So it's weird because like a lot of people come here and they I want to be a director, or a writer, or a producer, or whatever, and it's weird that it's rare, and so I feel editing. I love editing, and that's my passion to do that. Just because it's interesting, and I get to be alone in a room, and they give me the film, and I get to do whatever I want with it.
I've talked to a lot of editors, and that's always a curiosity of mine. Like, what about the job kind of matches up with your personality? Why are you ideally suited to being an editor?
Well, part of it's that you don't. I like to be alone with my thoughts, and although it's fun to go on the set once in a while, I feel that wouldn't be my strength if I worked in that kind of environment with 1,000 people running around. And I like the quietness, and I like the solitude of the editing room, where I can take I can actually direct what's already been directed, in a sense, and pick my favorite things and put them together, and they pay me to do that, and it's just amazing. Because I love movies, and I just thought, wow, I bet that's the coolest job. Although probably being a Bob Richardson is probably pretty damn cool too. But being a director or something like that, too much work, too many people asking you questions all the time. I like to be left alone, and I have my first assistant who runs interference for me. So it's great that I can just be allowed to focus on minutia and go through that. But it's really just came out of passion for movies and didn't know what else to do, because I grew up watching movies and just going, seeing like 2001 and Planet of the Apes and amazing movies that had giant impact on me. And then later in college, when The Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now and Taxi Driver and Annie Hall all came out, and just going, wow, that all the movies of the 70s were just incredible, and it made me think, like, wow, could I do that? And then figuring out what's the best job to have there, and then getting it. But it's really,
you've mentioned so many movies that actually I also feel that have changed my life. Movies like Taxi Driver, and that actually Born on the 4th was a movie that meant a whole lot to me as well. I mean, that movie just bleeds passion. And I got to ask, what is it like to get footage? What is it like to get Bob Richardson footage? That has to be like gold.
Well, at the time, it was just like, it's almost like, oh, he's my sister, or my brother. It's just that, because I came up with Bob, and I don't know that I appreciated it as much as I do now, although I knew that he's an operator. So not only is he, but he operates the camera too, and he's definitely one of the best operators in the business. And I kind of took it. It wasn't that I didn't. I thought he was great, but I took it for granted. I would say that that's Bobby. You know, he does all Oliver's movies, but the footage was amazing, and it just got better with each movie, I think. Or it changed. As you said, it evolved stylistically as Oliver did. But Bourne was I love that movie, and I really, really loved film and how it came out, and John Williams' score and the whole story, and that was a tough one because when you work on that footage, it's the same thing with JFK. These are not comedies. These are very emotional, harrowing movies. And when you work on those films, and and I'd be working on a scene where Ron Kovic's in a wheel bed with vomit on him, and there's and guys are walking around with full urine bags on their wheelchairs, missing limbs, and real vets that were brought in. It's just it takes a psychic toll on you. When you go home, it's painful. Yeah, and the pain stays with you for a long time, as it should, because you're making a movie about a painful thing, and you want it to have meaning and impact, and so it does. But it does take its toll when you're working on it, and especially on those scenes, you just come home and you dream about it, and it's tough. Yeah. But later when you see it, I just go, I'm just so proud of those movies. Yeah, I'm just so happy that I look at them and go, wow, I worked on that. It's incredible.
They mean a lot to a lot of people. I saw Born on the Fourth 8 times in the theater. I just kept going back to it.
Wow.
I'll never forget one of the times I really do. One of the times I watched the movie, there was obviously a veteran sitting behind me, and I could literally hear him shaking throughout the movie. But there was a need for him to see it. There was a need for him to stay in that theater and experience and pay honor to that story. It was one of the most touching moments I've ever had watching a movie.
Wow, that's incredible, amazing. Yeah, those shots of Ron Kovic's actually in the movie. You can see him, and I'm sure you know that. Like when he's in the parade scene. And when they have the fireworks going off, he has that
flinches, yeah,
jerk, and that's the real Ron. I mean, he wasn't doing that as an actor. It was just that's what happens to people, and it's
and what I also love about it in terms of Born on the Fourth, the way it opens. This is the most idealistic piece of Americana. I mean, the movie feels like childhood and promise. I mean, it's amazingly vivid. And then, so when his life goes to hell, you feel that tenfold. I love the kind of the broad, very highly operatic and emotional strokes that he works in those films.
Yeah, that was just great. That whole childhood thing, and I don't know if you noticed it, but it was like Bob and Oliver made all the colors super saturated during all of that, and then later it was all taken out. When it got up to modern day, it was all taken out. But all that childhood stuff it's a subtle thing, but it has impact, and it resonates because it's just on this subliminal level that you don't. It feels older. It feels like an innocent time, and it's all little things that just that add up to your experiences. Hopefully getting blown away.